Hello, my name is Ajla van Merdanovic, and today I will speak to you about gender mainstreaming in policy practice. Allow me a little bit of background about myself to demonstrate why this topic is important to me, but also why it should be important to you. For 15 years, I worked to advance democracies, human rights, and gender equality around the world, lastly serving as Chief of Democratic Governance and Gender Unit at the OSCE here in Warsaw. Prior to that, I worked for the United Nations in combating trafficking in persons in Western Balkans. And very early in my career, I worked in New York City for Accenture, a global consulting company. But besides these professional titles, I also have a different, maybe less glamorous background that I wish to share with you. I was a refugee girl from Sarajevo, and my country, Bosnia, and my childhood were torn by shelling and death. I ended up as an unaccompanied minor in the United States, a child alone. With this background, I wasn't exactly meant for success, but different policies, protection mechanisms for girl refugees, affirmative measures, quotas for underprivileged young women, and mentorship has enabled me to get protection, to study at prestigious Princeton University, to work in New York, in Tokyo, to be here today. It is likely that different gender policies or inclusion policies have enabled me to be here and present to you today. So, dear participants coming from your region, which is also often plagued by civil wars, crises, revolutions, you must also know similar struggles of your people. In turn, our policies, your policies, must deliver for them, for women and men, boys and girls, to help them achieve their best potential. Today, we'll try to explore some of our own perspectives and basic concepts of gender and gender equality, what we really mean by that. We will try to understand how this is related to policy practice and to your work as policy advisor, as government official, as an activist. We'll try to understand why gender mainstreaming is relevant to any policy work and how we can do gender mainstreaming in practice. So we cannot really seriously discuss a topic or a concept unless we are clear and truthful with ourselves what we really mean by that. Now, there are many misconceptions about gender and gender equality that have either unintentionally or purposefully obstructed this work and this topic. These concepts of gender and gender equality come close to our hearts. They touch our personal lives, our families, our traditions, the values we have. Sometimes they seem to question the way we function at work, the way we raise our boys and girls, the way I raise my own children. Sometimes they touch upon how we do things and they aim to change the way we have always been doing things. So there's often fear, there's hesitance, there's resistance, there's myth about what it really is. I'm sure you know a few myths. I have heard quite a few. So let me share with you some of the most common myths that I've heard about gender equality. Gender is the same as sex, that box you tick on the form. Gender is a Western idea that makes women aggressive. Gender ideas don't allow men to open the door for women. Gender is incompatible with traditional family values. And gender equality means putting incapable women in the positions of men. allow me to highlight that these are all myths. This is not the gender or gender equality that I'm talking about. So what is it about? What is gender? Gender is a social construct, actually an idea that's made up by our societies that aims to influence and govern and control what kind of roles, positions, what kind of opportunities, what kind of relationships we should have as women and men. It also tries to govern what kind of responsibilities we shall have, what kind of careers we shall pursue. But remember, gender is a social construct. It's a made up thing that our societies and different societies have employed differently. On the contrary, sex identifies the biological differences between men and women. So now that we understand gender as a social construct and as a construct where we are assigned some kind of roles and responsibilities, many people argue we can solve it with laws and policies on equal rights and opportunities, right? Equal rights and opportunities must solve it. Most countries, employers, institutions claim they guarantee equal rights and opportunities. As you see on this picture, for a fair selection to university, for example, everybody has to take the same exam. You, I, my son, the Ukrainian refugees, youth from Harlem, we cannot take the SAT to apply to Harvard or Princeton, right? Now, the fact that we come from different schools, different countries, different financial standing, that we speak different languages, maybe we have different abilities, different obstacles. Those things are often not taken into account when we speak about equal rights and opportunities. We as different people do face different obstacles. Whether we are looking at childcare, at caring of our elderly parents, at lack of finance, at access to contacts, to information. In turn, what we want to achieve with gender equality is not only that we are guaranteed equal rights and opportunities as a concept, but that we are guaranteed and provided with equal outcomes for women and men in all their diversity, in laws and policies, but also in terms of access to resources and services within families, communities, and society. The idea is that gender equality should allow us, each of us, to reach our best, our fullest potential. In turn, all policies must take into account and must aim to deliver outcomes and access to different groups of people, women and men, boys and girls. This is what gender equality is about. Now, we often talk about women and men, but we must also recognize that not all women and not all men are the same. We are not a uniform, homogeneous group. I'm a different woman than the one behind the screen, most likely. None of us fit neatly into separate packages, groups that we can neatly label. In fact, we all have different characteristics that makes us us. For example, when I looked at my daughter's class, there's different women and different men, different boys and girls in that class, different teachers, different assistants, different students. Some of them are older, younger. Some of them are native English speakers, other Polish. Some are quicker than others. Some have families. Some live with one parent. Some play sports. Others are in a wheelchair. Some come from wealthy families. Others are there in scholarships. And this is what makes all of us different. And this is what diversity is about. So when we talk about having policies deliver good outcomes for women and men, we must aim that these policies deliver good outcomes for different groups of women and men. Now, that is not only important as an idea or as a concept, but we must recognize that all our different backgrounds actually bring talent, make a good contribution to our communities, and policies that can deliver to all of us will guarantee the best possible outcomes for our communities, for our societies. So we recognize there's women and men, there's different women and men. We all have different backgrounds, needs, and talents, but then we still wonder and question why gender equality, why inclusion? And let me tell you why. We must deliver equality for women and men in all their diversity because it's a question of social justice. It's only fair that we as people get same access, same outcomes. But it's not only the fair and the right thing to do. Gender equality is actually the smart thing to do. When we exclude certain groups, when we exclude half our population from jobs or communities, we are actually excluding half our talent. Gender equality and inclusion allows us to utilize all our talent. Of course, gender equality is a human right guaranteed in various international and national laws and commitments. And as just discussed, gender equality and inclusion and contribution of diverse groups of people makes better policies and delivers better services and outcomes for all. Now, the absence of gender equality delivers the opposite. Inequality in policies delivers inequality in outcomes. We see that our policies affect different people differently. And here's some examples. Poverty affects different groups of people differently. Women are 70% of world's poorest people. 47% of people with disabilities live below poverty line. Let's look at politics. Only of a quarter of parliamentarians are women around the globe. For young people, minorities, or persons with disabilities, figures are even lower. That means that politics is accessible mainly to older, majority, able, and I would add financially apt men. The policies we have right now are excluding women from politics. They're also excluding young people or minorities. Let's look at education. Today only, we all may have heard the news that girls above 11 will not be allowed to attend schools in Afghanistan. Many boys and girls have difficulty accessing schools, whether due to their gender, their ethnicity, their passport, their legal status, their family having no money for transport to the nearest school. In fact, only 10% of children with a disability attend school, 10%. And let's look at jobs. Women are more unemployed, only about half of them participating in the labor force. And finally, let's look at life expectancy. This may be a surprise, but men live 4 or 5 years shorter than women worldwide. This is often due to men doing more heavy labor, having higher tendencies towards substance abuse, and also culturally, men don't go to the doctor as often as women. All this makes men's life shorter, and we must design our policies to address this gap. So how do we reach gender equality? We do that by using a two-track approach. On one hand, we do gender mainstreaming. We gather data, we analyze it, we consider how our policy, our action, our project will impact diverse groups of women and men, and what kind of outcomes it will deliver for them. On the other hand, recognizing certain gaps and our different backgrounds and circumstances as women and men, we empower groups to overcome specific gaps and challenges. We introduce targeted remedies to fill gaps and improve outcomes for certain groups. So what do we actually mean by gender mainstreaming? We mean the process of analyzing and assessing the impact for diverse groups of women and men of any planned action or service, including laws, policies, or programs. It's the process of analyzing and assessing needs, interests, priorities, and realities of different groups of women and men. The process of assessing impact for women and men of any policy in any area at all levels. And we may be looking at urban planning policy, are our parks safe for girls? We may be looking at education, are schools delivering for minority boys? We may be looking at our politics, are women represented? We may be looking at our health services delivering for our men, or we may be looking at any other policy. But we must recognize that our policies shall not be created in a blind vacuum of not really knowing how they impact people. So we do want to do gender mainstreaming to understand how our policy may impact people differently, or how it may respond to their needs and priorities, how it may help them get access to services. But how do we do this analysis in a systemic way? A simple way of doing gender mainstreaming is to use the method of 5 R's. We look at representation, we look at resources, we look at realities, we look at remedies, and we look at results. So here in more detail, when we do gender mainstreaming of any policy, we should employ the 5R method. So when we are developing a policy and a budget of any policy, say for a new university in town, a new public university to be established, we must look at representation, at quantity, at numbers. When we look at our future public university, we should ask, how many women, men are there, or do we expect there? And on which levels? As students, as professors, how many of them are in which positions? How many of them will be able to get promoted How many of them will be managers, will be deans of faculties? We must then look at resources, at money, time, information. We must look at salaries, at scholarships, at childcare, at pension funds, at travel allowances, and ask the question as to which women and men do diverse groups of women and men have access to these financial and other resources. Now, in addition to looking at the numbers and at cash, we must dig deeper. We must look at realities. We must ask the question of what are the realities for diverse groups of women and men at this university? If we're looking at students from minority backgrounds, for example, we may ask what obstacles they face. Is there a language barrier? Maybe their high school doesn't offer guidance on applying to universities. Maybe they lack confidence or fear they wouldn't belong at such a university. What is stopping diverse groups of women and men from achieving their full potential at this university, whether as students or as staff? Now, having done this analysis, we must aim to identify remedies needed to fill the gaps. What targeted measures can we introduce as policymakers, as university management, to ensure that this university delivers for women and men of diverse backgrounds, whether as students or as staff? Do we need to offer housing support, writing courses, university preparation online, career advancement, mentorship, support groups? And let us look at what results we are expecting. What kind of outcome do we really want for women and men from this university? How should it deliver for them? And if we are not doing well, what shall we change or reprogram? In conclusion, when designing policies, activities, projects, advocacy campaigns, remember the 5 R's of gender mainstreaming. And also, don't forget to wear your gender glasses. They will give you a new view on people. They will help you see people in all their diversity. They will remind you, these glasses will remind you to ask yourself, how is your policy, your project delivering for diverse groups of women and men? How your plans or efforts may impact them, and how you can ensure that these diverse groups of women and men have the best possible outcomes and achieve the best they can achieve. We'll be discussing some more of the gender mainstreaming steps in class tomorrow. Thank you very much.